Ladies and gentlemen, in this part of the summit, we're going to be diving a little deeper into our summit theme, the art of disruption, with our next two presenters. First, we're delighted to be joined by a leading figure from the world of business. Lynda O'Grady has previously held senior roles at Telstra, including as Chief of Product. Prior to this, she was Commercial Director of Australian Consolidated Press, the publishing subsidiary of PBL, and General Manager of Alcatel Australia. Lynda is a non-executive director of Domino's Pizza Enterprises Limited, a member of the advisory board of Jameson Coote Bonds and Council of Southern Cross University, and she has also just joined the soon-to-be listed Wagner's Holdings Limited as an NED. Lynda is also, as I'm sure a lot of you know, the current chairman of the Aged Care Financing Authority, a statutory committee established to provide independent advice to government on funding and financing issues in aged care. She's versatile, she's across a lot of sectors. Would you please welcome, to talk about the impact of disruption during her long and very successful career, Lynda O'Grady. Welcome, Lynda.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So firstly, I'm not wearing my ACFA hat today, so I'm not going to be talking with you about aged care and the intersection with the retirement village industry. I've been asked to speak about disruption. And Kay may have made a faux pas there, which is probably very realistic because disruption can lead to some serious demolition of industries and businesses. So today, I'm going to talk with you about disruption. Now, understandably, we're all quite obsessed with the notion of disruption and have a tendency to think of it as a new threat. I actually don't think it's that new. What is new is the warp speed with which it's changing so many industries. But more particularly, the new players are a bit like commercial guerrilla fighters. They generally haven't declared war until they're here. They don't belong to a known enemy, and they certainly don't wear corporate uniforms. Indeed, they're not the usual competitors. They don't use traditional weapons, and they have absolutely no respect for incumbency. However, disruptive changes have been reshaping our commercial landscape for decades. I see it as the inevitable and frankly desirable sign of progress. So let me share with you some of the disruptive changes that I've participated in or observed at the edge, and then I'll make some suggestions about how you might avoid being disrupted or indeed prepare to disrupt. So a few personal stories. In the early 1980s, I was the market development manager of Elders IXL. In that role, it was a great job. It sent me around the world where my job was to try and find, license, or acquire recipes for new food products to bring back to Australia. So I brought back some samples of some of the first microwave meals from Universal Foods. I also had embargoed photos under secrecy agreements from the first manufacturers of microwave ovens. Now, Elders at the time had massive supermarket facings. Those of you of my age might remember they had dairy and tinned food facings, so sunbeam oils and margarines. So I was pretty excited because I just knew that this category would ultimately dominate the shelves. Huge volumes and wide varieties. But my colleagues back in Australia were derisive. So, Lynda, you're telling us that women will buy bricks of food, they'll nuke them, and then they'll take the meal straight to the table on the package? They attacked. Women will never abrogate their responsibilities to their families. They are dedicated to preparing nourishing meals from first principles using fresh ingredients. And they argued that people would never invest in those purpose-built appliances? And indeed, where would they fit into the kitchens of the day with their ranges and their hot plates? So I faced a litany of rational objections. They were launched to prove that this category would never gain traction. Regulatory. There weren't any rules surrounding this new genre, this new category, and there'd be all kinds of food hygiene risks. Consumer resistance to a new class of appliance? I don't think so. And then social expectations of women and what their families expected of them. History has proven otherwise. Fortunately, I was also involved in helping Elders divest its food businesses during the next couple of years. So the missed opportunity for Elders was a moot issue. After that, I decided I needed to find an organisation which was at the frontier, both in terms of products and accepting a young woman leader. I found Laser Electronics and was appointed CEO with the promise of success-based equity participation. Now, the company specialised in industrial laser applications, so such as surveying and materials cutting. But within about 18 months, I'd negotiated prospective distribution agreements for surgical lasers with two companies, Ferranti of Italy and an Israeli organisation. Again, my advocacy skills let me down. The founder and owner, an elderly man whose life work had culminated in this quite remarkable company, was terrified that these new products and our company, because the product risk passed to the distributor, the Australian distributor, would be responsible for killing people. He couldn't sleep, and ultimately we didn't proceed. And I understand why. However, again, as you well know, laser equipment has transformed many regular surgical procedures. In the 1990s, I joined Alcatel as the head of the Business Systems Division. The Business Systems Division had a factory manufacturing Telstra's rental phone, supplied all of the payphones, and had a range of PABXs, which I discovered had pretty well little or no market share. So having examined and had a beauty parade of the Alcatel PABX compared with its competitors, we discovered the reason for the low market share was that although it didn't compare too unfavourably with its competitors, it was pretty light on functionality. So after comprehensive research, a global trip or two, and ultimately a pretty fraught negotiation with the executive committee in Paris, I was authorised this time to license the nascent CTI technology of a very small software developer in San Francisco called Genesis Communication Systems. Now, call centres were even more clumsy and even less efficient than they are now. But this embedded computer telephony integration meant that the agent could engage with a caller personally because their file from the computer was popped to the screen and they could record orders or other parts of the conversations agreed with the customer during the call. Now, it wasn't only the technology that was transformational, the whole process re-engineering, and of course that proximity and customer engagement. Now, Genesis CTI is a Wilkinson razor blade story. Remember the Wilkinson sword razor blade story? Well, because Alcatel, once its techos got under the hood, so liked the product that they went and bought the company. They had to buy shares off NASDAQ because it had been recently listed. But at last, it had been successful, and that was a triumphant investment. During the 2000s with Telstra, I had a much bigger playground for innovation and disruptive technologies, and as Chief of Product, a mandate to commercialise them. Now, some of the innovations like Home Messages 101 and Telstra Call Connect, which are everyday now, were simple but popular and quite changing for individuals using them, highly profitable for Telstra, but not particularly disruptive. Others fundamentally changed the way people lived and worked. Internet access, graduating from dial-up to ADSL2 to even mobile data. Wi-Fi hotspots installed nationwide, didn't exist before 2000. Voice recognition being applied to directory assistance, taxi and food ordering, and all manner of, including Siri, voice recognition inside Siri. Two-factor authentication for telebanking and netbank, using the SMSs to make sure that it really is you when you were telebanking or more recently net banking. And of course, then there were camera phones, which many said would never catch on. Nobody would be able to pay for the bandwidth, the internal engineers said. So since Telstra, I've been standing on the balcony rather than on the dance floor, consulting, advising, and sitting on boards. However, my lifelong fascination with new stuff has made me a dedicated student of technologies, business models, and processes that are changing the landscape for many industries. A couple of years ago, I was invited to join a panel of one of the state government reviews of the ride-sharing industry. I declined. I knew I really couldn't be objective. I'd applauded them and become an early adopter when Uber burst onto the scene. Unfortunately, it seems now to be facing some serious growing pains and the consequence perhaps of hubris and some cultural issues. But why was Uber able to steal such a march? Simply, in my view, market resentment of the taxi industry's inertia, disrespect of the customer, manifesting unkempt vehicles, untrained or sometimes rude drivers, failure to honour our phone bookings, exorbitant credit card surcharges. Simply the failure to innovate, to respond to messages that they must have been receiving on a daily basis in the form of complaints. Uber, on the other hand, met the consumer's real needs. And I say real needs because they may not have articulated them. But have a think about it. Accessibility. They know who you are and where you are, wherever and whenever, whether it's Melbourne, London, San Francisco, rather than you finding them or waiting in a taxi rank. The power of decision-making. You, me, we can accept or decline the quoted fee in advance of a trip. Convenience. Automatic payment and receipting means that delays or security issues paying at the other end are over. Fundamental respect, not just for the passenger, but for the driver, with transparent bilateral ratings and a real recourse in the case of a complaint. And then stickiness, that word that in all our organisations we love, the notion of sticky customers. Real-time engagement with the customer meant the pre-registration assures priority, or at least we feel that it does. Online booking, payment and accounting assure continuity. As you've heard, I have the privilege to serve on the board of Domino's Pizzas, which operates in 7 countries. I should say pleasure as well as privilege, because Don May and his team are constantly innovating. But their latest may be the most exciting to date. Let me show you.
At Domino's, we're always trying to be better. We aim to deliver great quality pizzas, but we know that sometimes we don't get it right. And even one bad experience is one too many. So we've set our sights on a solution with our biggest product quality innovation ever. Introducing Domino's Pizza Checker. The next leap forward in our Drew Artificial Intelligence program. Pizza Checker is an electronic eye that will soon be above every Domino's cutting bench in the country. It instantly checks the quality of every pizza we make, then displays it online for every customer to see. Pizza Checker verifies pizza type, correct toppings, topping distribution, crust type, and temperature. It's all about giving people more visibility of their order, delivering better quality pizzas, more efficient stores, and more satisfied customers, which means there's more happiness all round. Pizza Checker, only at Domino's.
you. I'll take that back to John and the team. Obviously, it uses some seriously cool technology. But look, it's leading. It's not bleeding edge technology. It's image recognition and artificial intelligence. They're here and now. They are mature technology being used inside lots of different organisations for all different applications. Now remember, I have nothing to do with that wonderful initiative. So I sit on the board, so I can't and don't claim any credit. So forgive me though, while I tell you why I think it is so brilliant. Firstly, it actively addresses negative customer feedback. Complaints must be heard and they are resolved. 2, it's providing staff with their very own virtual 21st century assistant who can be objective and explain why it isn't perfect and to help them make it perfect next time. But most importantly, it's sharing the evidence. It's not just enough to be striving to be perfect. We're then sharing the evidence with the customer so they know it's been QA'd, or should I say AI'd. So what are the main themes of disruption? I commend to you this book from the McKinsey Global Institute. Now they describe 4 themes of disruption. Globalisation, effectively the removal of borders for people, trade, money, ideas. Urbanisation, agglomeration of people in more and more dense environments. Ageing demographics, and of course the continuing digital technology revolution. They offer a wealth of advice on how to be ready. It's a really excellent read, and if you only have time to read the final chapter, please do so. Even if you have to get it on Audible, listen intently. But frankly, I actually think that the teachings of ancient warfare also provide pretty valuable lessons. So let's think about some of those lessons for the retirement village industry. Really understand your market. Even your elderly customer base is not homogeneous. Indeed, their only common characteristic is their age. There are micro segments with huge diversity of preferences and attributes. Remember, a market is made up of individual customers. Really tune in to all the feedback. Listen, watch, and formulate root cause for every complaint. Because customers may be really saying something different, or indeed not saying anything, to what you are hearing. So really listen to the underlying tone and content. And leverage data. Little data, big data. Collect it, analyse it, and use it. Critically focus on you and your offering. In most industries, today's offerings and the standards are just not good enough. Probably not even for today, let alone tomorrow and the future. Be critical and be impatient with the status quo. Nothing should be good enough. Introduce global scanning of all things new in all different fields. Access many sources of information. Be constantly reading, studying, watching for information and insights. But more particularly, explore how they may be deployed in your industry. Don't make presumptions about likely uptake. Remember those microwave meals? Or closer to home, who would have ever thought SMSing? Who would ever have thought that we'd be typing short messages to each other on tiny little keyboards that can transmit instantly? In fact, remember what Stephen Jobs' brilliant remark was: people don't know what they want until I, Stephen Jobs, show them. And of course, don't forget back of house. Some of the most powerful innovations transform enabling systems and processes, such as CTI. Know the competitive landscape. Now, this is not just your traditional competitors. You've got to be ready for those guerrilla warriors. Also, understanding the legislative and regulatory frameworks, today's landscape, the rules of the game will change in most industries during the next decade. We've heard this morning of the 8-point plan. You can be very sure that both the aged care and the retirement village industries, as well as many, many other industries, ride-sharing, driverless cars, the legislation and the regulation will have to run to catch up with the disruptions that are coming from all over the world. Know the size of the prize, or indeed the risk of the loss, the scope of the threat. Some businesses don't know that they're betting the farm. You need to understand the imperative and have a clear sense of the urgency, and avoid at all costs the Pyrrhic victories. Don't climb up a mountain if you don't know what's there and what's on the other side. Enjoy and celebrate the process as well as the results of innovating. It's a game as much as a business tool. And involve the whole organisation. And when I say the whole organisation, I mean the whole ecology. Not only your staff, those inside, but as we heard this morning, outsourced quality inputs. Your residents, the neighbourhoods and the community and the public at large. When someone bothers to speak up or speak out, it's important to be listening. Just do it. Beware of analysis paralysis. Research and analysis are necessary, but be careful of constantly revisiting numbers and theories, and you'll never get them right. Be careful not to get bogged down with business cases. The best business cases I've ever done were the ones where we shot the numbers out of the park, and of course the worst were when nobody came to dinner. Pilot, test, reject, or revise based on critical feedback at each milestone, but ultimately do something. Launch it or ditch it. Okay? Failure is acceptable as long as you fail privately and inside your organisation. But remember, do something, because there is no traction. There is no traction without action. So disruption is ubiquitous, but it's not new. And I believe it's now happening at warp speeds from the most unexpected sources. Prepare to be surprised so that you aren't shocked. And to channel the authors of No Ordinary Disruption, their two main messages are: one, reignite your intuition. Suspend judgment based on everything you've seen and heard and done in your careers, and basically reignite your intuition about what's likely to be desired and required in the future, and reimagine the future, because it'll be very different. And unless you reignite your intuition and reimagine the future, you won't survive or thrive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynda. And I have the pleasure of moderating a short Q&A session with you. So can I invite you, let's go and sit down over there. I've got my glasses handy in case I can't read the questions. But please, feel free to pop your hand up for a microphone. First of all, Lynda, I never thought I'd hear the word artificial intelligence and pizza in the same sentence.
There you go.
And microwaves, where would we be without them? Perhaps I'll get the ball rolling while people are thinking of their questions for you. Is it possible to forecast disruption? Is it possible to see it coming, identify it?
Okay. As I said, I think the competitors come from an array of very unusual sources these days. To go to my point about Uber, I think the best defence and the way in which to forecast whether you are likely to be the subject of serious disruption is to be tuned in to the quality of your current offering, so that you know what are likely to be the Achilles heels or the weaknesses, where a disruptor, a newcomer, will actually basically find an open door. In other words, where the customers are ready for change.
And in the aged care sector, with your hat on as chair of the Financing Authority, what would you say were the biggest challenges facing the sector at the moment, and how best can they be overcome?
Okay, well...
That's a big one, I know.
Okay, I think the first thing is that the aged care system is huge, and many people don't understand that there's three parts of it: community, home and residential aged care. I think that the biggest challenge, and I say it publicly every time, is to actually make sure that the public, and there's 3.7 million people I think over 65 years of age, understand what's available, firstly at a personal level, what's likely to happen during the next 20, 30 years of their lives, but also what's available that they can avail themselves at different times when they need those extra services. So I think the issue, someone spoke this morning about image, partly is that I think we aren't communicating. Firstly, none of us actually are in a hurry to accept that we are ageing and that we may ultimately need some of these services. But I think the industry, and I do say the industry, not the government, really has an opportunity to communicate with the public about the industry and what the services are, so that the public generally can decide if and when they want to access those. Because it's actually a fine set of services, but many people misunderstand them.
Communication is a big thing that's certainly coming up here. We've got a couple of SMS questions. Did I see somebody, though, with their hand up before? No? Okay, Lynda, first question on the screen is, when you have complicated products, how can you be disruptive and bring people along with you?
Okay, well, it comes to
complicated products.
Yeah, I think the first thing, it's about communication. I mean, in Telstra I had a 1, 2, 3 ABC rule. If you couldn't explain it, 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, then it was too complicated. It had too many things so I think the first thing is to translate from the deep engineering kind of software magic into what's in it for me, namely the customer, and to be able to explain that in terms of a benefit statement.
And again, going back to this theme of communication, another question is, do you think the best disruptions come from actually listening to customer feedback?
Well, I think if you solve your own problems, then you've built a fortress, a big moat, around your business with your customers inside the fortress. So I think that indeed accepting that everybody's feedback, complaint, communication is valid for them and therefore has to be accepted and taken seriously, and then basically collating those to see whether or not there are themes and how they should be addressed.
Now, we had a personal question about socks before. This one is, would you choose to move to a retirement village, Lynda?
Absolutely. In fact, I did a secret shopper. Secret shopper, which I subsequently announced to the owners of the secret shopper. And I took a colleague. I wanted to take my sister, who is single lady, but I ended up taking a friend. And I've got to tell you, I was, and as she was in the market for a home, and she said, I want Unit 1C. Okay? My experience, the way I described it, it was a beautiful neighbourhood campus living with all the kind of amenities of a Club Med tour, the freedom and agency to be able to get in my car or in my motorhome and travel wherever I wanted, and knowing that there were people who would know if I went missing and whom I could depend on for company or for support. So absolutely.
I want to hang out in one of those retirement homes that Jeff showed us with all those very attractive people. But did you notice that?
And look, my experience, I have to say, I was delighted, surprised and delighted. As much with the experience with the staff, and particularly in the light of the awful media in July, August, the manner in which the sales process, because I was expecting, particularly with my friend who was right in the age category, but I found it a very productive, positive.
But what is it that you are specifically looking for in choosing that destination?
Okay, well look, I think the research shows many things. I mean, I think to some extent, and again, the market is, so micro segmented. For some people, it's privacy, it's having security, knowing that there's, if you like, a community where people will know that you're there. It is the community of actually having friends, because in many cases people are living in the dwellings that they raised their families in, and they're empty nested, and particularly if they've lost a spouse. But I think that they're good, of course they're good quality, properties, they're homes. I think it's, as I said, it's a combination of a neighbourhood, or campus living, meets Club Med, meets, it reminds me a little bit in a way of kind of on-campus university living.
We're not fussy really, are we,
Yeah,
at the end of the day?
Yeah, we can close the door, nobody can get at us, but if we want to, we can open the door and whatever.
We have a question here regarding Domino's AI. Is Domino's AI more related to perception of quality, or does the consumer actually access that app that we saw? Is uptake of the technology the driver?
Okay.
So is this a perception that the customer has some input?
Oh, no. The customer is provided, as you saw on the film, customer is provided with a photograph of their pizza after it's been cleared by Drew as being compliant with all of the facets that have been assessed. My word. And
so as a customer, I can
you'll see it.
Apply that technology, that AI technology, make sure my pizza
well, right from start, you can
meet
order.
those standards.
You'll know. You can see the clock as it's being ordered, cooked, etc. You'll actually then see it being AI'd, and then you'll actually can GPS track it so you can see the driver coming to your house.
Pizza for dinner tonight. Okay, we have a couple more questions. Lynda, is there a better financing model that we should move to, given the ongoing issues with the DMF model?
Oh dear.
And pardon my ignorance, what's the DMF model?
Deferred management fee.
Fee, right.
Look, I think, frankly, this is yet another issue of communication. I mean, my observation, and remember, I'm not in your industry. Pardon my back, Jennifer. Not in the industry, but my understanding, having done a little bit of research, is that people are entering really good quality real estate for quite good market entry price. And they are not having to pay for a range of the amenity and services until the time at which they exit. So I think partly, I mean, there may be an issue of the quantum, but to my mind, and it's not from within the industry, it's about actually communicating about more clearly and comprehensively about what it is and what it isn't and what the sums look like at the end.
I hope that's answered that question. Lynda, we've got about 6 more minutes left. Big data. I've always been fascinated by the term big data, and you touched on it briefly. We're going to hear more about it from Logan very soon. Do you think that most businesses, first of all, properly understand what big data is and then use it effectively?
Okay, well, with apologies to Logan, wherever he is, I'm not an expert or a student of it. I'm a user, though. So my view is that big data is just an aggregation of lots of little data, okay? Where effectively we're collecting information about our customers, what they've bought, what their preferences are, etc. And then the big computers are aggregating it, sorting it out, etc., and telling us what it's saying in terms of the insights that the smart computers can actually discern. So when I studied, which was a very, very long time ago, we used to use statistics. And so we'd collect samples, and then we'd ask a series of questions, and then we'd digest those, and then we'd deliver a result based on statistical reliability or, standard deviations and what have you. Today, effectively, data about us can be collected real time without us even knowing. So as we pass through the checkout, it can be collating what our buying habits are, what we've bought, etc. So it's a new world that's enabled the collection of data and information about us, data that then aggregated, and frankly not generally de-identified, so your name is not that you buy Arnott's, Scotch finger biscuits, but that, what are the characteristics of a group of people who are doing something similar.
Is it being used and accessed effectively in the sector? Do you think?
Look, I really couldn't say whether in the retirement village industry it is. I think there are lots of, the masterful data collectors are those who are under the hood, if you like, the Googles and the Amazons and what have you, with whom we interface and provide lots of data without actually knowing that, we sign our privacy statement that they can use it so long as they de-identify it. But I'm sure that there are lots of big data sources that the messaging can be used for the retirement village sector. But frankly, most of you have got hundreds, perhaps thousands of specific clients and prospective clients. It's possible, I suppose, to collect data and try and analyse that, but perhaps somebody in the break will tell me how they're already using it, but I'm not familiar with it.
Sure. And one final question. Lynda, you make the statement that you're not in the industry, but many residents use home care services and many operators are approved providers. How should or could home care work more closely with the RV industry?
Okay. Again, many of you will have heard me say this before. I think home care requires, particularly with the introduction of consumer-directed care and the obligation to actually have a direct customer contract agreement with a home care client, means that there are scale issues. Small home care providers are going to and are having difficulty having the scale to be able to provide the services and do the reporting and accounting and so forth. Retirement village, so that's number one. Number two, though, is that retirement villages actually, like nursing homes, but retirement villages are uniquely positioned because they're located generally in a community, either the community itself, which needs, some of their residents want and are eligible for home care packages, or the bigger community where people are not ready to change residence, but are actually have home care packages or would like to avail themselves on a fee-for-service of the services that a retirement village can have. And can I tell you that one of the sleepers that I think that both aged care homes and retirement villages are not yet leveraging are their beautiful communal amenity. Those beautiful dining rooms, the recreational spaces, etc. If you think about people who are living in the community, those neighbourhoods, who don't have a place to go. They may be being taken to bingo or to bowls or, or to their doctors, etc. But having a place where they would actually be welcome might be a very smart marketing campaign for retirement village owners, because those people become accustomed to that community. And if they do want to change residence, where's the logical place to go, but where they've found a community over the last X years.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. And Lynda O'Grady, thank you very much for sharing your corporate wisdom with us this afternoon. Hopefully you can stay with us during the afternoon and we might find out more about big data over the afternoon tea break. Would you please thank Lynda O'Grady? Thank you.